Hello, everyone, and small group here today. I want to continue with the theme that we started of seeing and thinking like an artist when we view a subject to determine what sequence or what procedure I should take when I paint it. So today, I wanted to concentrate and you've heard me talk about it before, but I really want to drill down on it today. Seeing like the light, which means that it separates things into areas of light and shadow. It gets some places, it doesn't get others, and partially it gets to some of the in-between places. But it's important to see that and understand that and feel it and think like it when you go to paint. So today I picked Stonehenge. A painter friend of mine from Illinois was there this summer, and she got this wonderful picture of Stonehenge. And I want us to last week we were dealing with, I was trying to not describe the things by their name. I was trying to describe them in our painting vocabulary: area of blue, area of green, shape with a kind of a neutral gray-green, so on like that. But to give you some other examples of seeing like the light sees, it's separating things into light and shadow. These are some little ink drawings by Fort Madison artist. And she just uses white paper and black India ink and separates the entire image into where the light gets and where the light doesn't get. This Jessica Kirby is her name. You can tell, obviously, these are people walking down a street. It's lovely how the side of the building, back of the guy's hat, connects with these trees, that comes down, sneaks over here, comes underneath, building shadows, pants and shirt, cars, all that sort of thing. If you can see these, and I'm sorry, I'm using the names for the objects. I won't do that when we do our project. Here again, notice how these areas where the light does not get, or the object is a naturally dark object, connect or get very close to each other, and they become this sequence. And this sneaks over to that, and that sneaks over to that. And we know there's two legs in there, and that they're close together, and we get that, but she has disciplined herself to only put darks where there are darks and lights where there are lights. A similar sort of thing with in color here. All these, we would tend to paint these leaves individually in these stems, and notice how they just kind of merge into the container of water. They define this, which is the subject or the focal point, and they support that very wonderfully. And we have no question as to what's what in this, but it's extremely abstract. Hi, Karen. So back to our subject here. I'm going to, hi, Jean. Carol, hi. I'm going to make my big divisions of space, as I usually do. The key horizontal, which is running through here. And then my key vertical, since we have a very horizontal group of objects here, I'm going to call it that, because that is the one that sticks up the most. And I'm going to say this whole thing fits into a rectangle. And you probably won't be able to see these lines. I will darken them up as I go. You must see these things in a large grouping and not in individual things and try to draw them one at a time, because we will tend to space them equally and they're not. We'll tend to draw them equal sized and they're not. So we need to find this big grouping that everything fits into first. And we're seeing a hole here. If you see the hole and you draw the hole, it will feel whole. If you see the parts and draw the parts, it will feel partitioned. So I'm going to, what's that? Roughly a third. This grouping here falls within this part of it. Just light pressure on the pencil, just doing that. This group is a little lower and slightly angled along their top. This one is slightly angled that way. I'm going to find all of this first. Now, I also have a lower edge that is somewhat different. This comes to roughly about the halfway mark. If that thing looks like a shape to you, or mnemonic shape, memnonic shape, go ahead and do that. But note where the bottom of this, the bottom of that, the bottom of that, they're all in different places. And that's what helps us find them in space. There's a slight diagonal to that as well. And since they are in a curved or a circular grouping, that would be exactly what we'd expect to find. This pair of objects, I'm going to find the split in between these two. Notice that the spacings between these things appear somewhat irregular. This one is a little bit past the center. It's nearly equally distant spaced between this group and that group. And it's a titch higher than that one. So they're rectangular. That's how I'm going to start. And then I'm going to turn them into something that's more like what they look like. So there's in between here is a smaller one. It's in a kind of a leaning rectangle, and it's made up of two tall rectangles. And the other nice thing, now this looks like it divides into, there's one thing in front of another thing perhaps. Okay, I'm going to start putting some curvature to them. Look at that shape in there. Looks like a Japanese cleaver or a butcher's meat cleaver. So that'll help me draw that. Where does the top of that come relative to this? A little below that. If I draw a Japanese meat cleaver, I'm most of the way there. And I can erase later. Oh, I need to make my cleaver higher. A little bit of a jog there. Okay, and notice that my bottoms here, there's a space between these things. And the one that's on the left is a little bit further down. Its bottom is a little bit lower than the one on the right. And we've got a line back through there, a small line through here. If that reminds you of anything, maybe an elephant foot. As I said before, it looks like we've got one rectangle in front of another rectangle. Looks like it's got a bit of a lean to it as well. There's an interesting thing. I don't know if you can see this. That thing leans to the left. I tried to draw it leaning to the right. I don't know why I do that. You have to watch these things. We tend to want to make... Now I'm looking at this. I think I need to bring it out a little further. Can always correct as I go. There's a Missouri, Mississippi shape in between there. I'm going to say it's okay while we're talking about these. Hi, Eric. I'm going to say it's okay to use a proper name of something, provided it's not the proper name of the thing that I'm trying to draw. So, for example, this object down here, I'm not going to name it for what it is, but it reminds me of a sarcophagi. That there. Let's bring this out a little further. Yeah. This, I think I'm going to bring, oh, yep, because that needs to be about there. This hits that here, not there. So, you can always redraw. And that gives me a bit more space in between here, which I should have. And then there's another item here. And I think it's lovely the way that thing breaks up this space in between here. Now, I'm getting stuff out where I want it, so I'm going to erase the lines I don't want after I've got the line drawn that I do want. This whole business needs to come a little further, because that's not a big space. About to here. Bottom below that, or above this, again we have some little odd objects here. Bottoms are different places. Watch them. That will keep the thing from looking like the ducks in the shooting gallery kind of thing. Hi, Kathy. If you know what I mean, they're those little ducks that run along on a flat two-dimensional track and you try to shoot them with the badly screwed up sights on popcorn to win a pink teddy bear or something. Now, this is an odd one. It's basically a rectangle. The whole thing falls within a rectangle that leans slightly to the right. But the top portion of it is a little seems to be undersized. If it was a hat on a person, the hat's too small. Again, look where the base of it is. It's above, or in a different place than some of these other bases. Then we have a little thing here. Sometimes it's tough to sort out the people in the, oh, darn. Okay, I have to put a quarter in the jar. Now these things back here, these dark shapes, are a nice stopping point for when we paint this area and go to these objects and that area. So we don't have to worry. So now I'm going to try and make this a little more as it is. So this whole thing and right now I'm treating these things, they're illuminated, partially they have shadows and they have non-shadows. And I am drawing the whole thing, and then we will treat you'll see, the shadows with a particular way of relating to them. I think this could stand to be a little bigger, wider. Okay, now I'm going to start erasing that big rectangle that I was fitting the whole thing into, and which I had to stretch out. There's something tucked in behind that one. A rectangle or two in hiding, it looks like. And I'm going to okay, now I think we're about to the point where we can start thinking about putting some color on this. We have distinct, obviously this is our focal point, our subject. And then we have a distant area in this shape and a closer area in that shape. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to squint at it hard, and I'm going to try to determine the value for these 1, 2, 3 areas. So we've got a situation where these are a tad bit lighter except where they're dark. And this is only a tad bit darker than that. So I'm going to say light medium, and dark on the whole. And I guess I'm not including as much of this big blue shape because I don't think we need that much. I want to focus in here a little more. Now, let's see. I generally paint lighter to darker. And last week I mentioned that there's sometimes reasons when you might not do that exactly the way we usually do. I'm wondering if today is one of those days. A secondary sequence or way of thinking about light to dark, but also from top of the page to the bottom of the page, because the gravity is going to be pulling the water. Now, some folks had some questions last week. I should answer them today ahead of time, what I'm using. This is 11 by 15, cold press, 140 pound. This is a new paper I'm trying called Milford. It's made by Saunders Waterford. It's a little different sizing. But it's a 100% cotton, 140 pound cold press paper. I have taped it. Maybe you can see this. It's because I got black tape on a black board. See how I can get the pencil in there? I tape to the edge of the paper, not over the edge of the paper. So effectively, the paper is held only at the four corners. And the reason for that, excuse me, I can see now these are too tall. Is by not holding it down all along its edges, it has when the paper gets wet and begins to shrink and swell, then it has a little bit more play. It can move, and it won't belly out so much when the paper is wet, particularly if you're doing big wet washes. The sky, doggone it, I have to put another quarter in the jar. The blue area gets lighter as it goes down to the green area and these things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up a lighter color and a darker color. And I'm also going to modify this color. It gets a little yellower, greener as we get to the lower edge of it. So I'm going to take some, let's see, maybe a mix of ultramarine. These are going to be runny paint mixes. And let's see. Let's put a little bit of cerulean into that. Runny paint. Biggish brush. Mop brush. I think I'll make extra because, heck. And I spritzed my paints to wake them up a bit. If your paint has dried, then you want to get it awake by spritzing some water on it so it's easier to get it to come up. Let's get sounds crazy, but I am going to get maybe some orange or cat orange or yellow ochre or maybe a little of both. Mostly the yellow ochre. That too, I'm going to want to be somewhat runny. Yeah, not somewhat runny, definitely runny. You'll see why here in a moment. Now my friend Catherine isn't here today. She's usually here. And I sometimes tease her because she paints uphill, like so. And I'm going to paint uphill today because there's a reason to do this. And you'll see why. Maybe a little bit more of that orange. I'm going to paint the lower portion of this shape. And I don't care if a little bit of it gets into, let's put a little more water in that. I don't care if it gets into the objects here, because they're going to be similarly colored. Now, rinse that, blot it, get my blue, and I'm going to come down from the top, making a good strong bead. Oh, look at that. Well, I didn't mean to do that. Because I want this to meet that color and blend into it, which it's sure enough doing, isn't it? Tease it down with a little water. But the big thing here is I want the sky. Well, let's put a little more of the blue at the top. It's a dangerous thing to do. You want to go in with more pigment if you do this. So now, alternatively, if you get some color where you don't want some color, feel free to mop it out. But the other advantage of this particular color is that I can go from this, I can bring a little bit of this blue, hi Ann, into this color that I had here, and start painting this green area. So into my blue, because it's kind of green and kind of brown, I'm going to throw a little bit of the bright yellow to make a brighter green. And bring it to where I think I see it. Let's see, do I want to mop anywhere here? I think I might want to mop. So I take the brush and I squeeze it out. And kind of mop a bit there and there. I am going to make this darker green and brighter green as I come forward. So more pigment from my two yellows, yellow ochre and cad yellow, and pick up some of the blue that I used for the blue area at top. I'm creating a bit of a bead here, but this is an area I don't need a dead smooth kind of color. This appears to be more textured than that, so that's okay. Put a little more blue into it. Let's put some Prussian in it to get it quite green. Prussian and yellow ochre. More of everything. So as I'm going down here, the concentration of pigment is greater. In other words, more pigment, less water. So the painting's getting there. The paint is getting less runny than before. It's sort of slow moving at this point. And oh, it's just for some variety and texture. I am going to make a bluer green from all these components, and I'm going to touch it in here or there. To get an irregular kind of patterning. I'll make it a little more yellow at the back, even maybe a little more yellow ochre. This area back here, perhaps in there, and here. Get some of that blue again. We could even, can be free with this. You could splatter a bit of blue into these areas to get a little more oddball texture. The board is at an angle of about 45 degrees, so that's why everything's tending to go downhill. Now I think what I'm going to do is do a little softening and blotting on this, and then I'm going to dry it. So I'm going to use the hair dryer now. So now as you can see, it actually appears to be lighter at the top and darker at the bottom, the reverse of what I was looking at here. So I'm going to live with that. I'm going to keep what we have and say, well, I'll explain why. Notice also, the thing to do to make that grade 8 dark to light is maybe you could have whipped your board. If you hold it free, just turn it upside down so it goes the other way. So it's the context? Yes. And then hopefully you can see here that paper is dried very flat, even though I had it very wet. That's the rationale behind taping this to the edge and not across the edge. So I'm gonna clean up some of these pencil lines. Well, actually it won't really matter. Now we're gonna get the color of these objects in here, and I'm seeing them as a sort of I get brush about the same size as the one I was using, but it's stiffer here so it doesn't hold as much paint. Size-wise, they're pretty similar. I am going to throw some, I'm just going to go with the basic, my good old standby ultramarine blue and burnt sienna or red iron oxide. Now that looks bluish gray. Let's put a little more blue in that. And I'm going to put some more water in it to get it. And then I'm just going to hit these shapes in their entirety, being careful.
What's your real name? My real name is Mark, but everybody used to call me Herb.
And I'm going to just hit the tops at this point of this rectangular shapes.
Oh, yeah. Well, everybody has nicknames.
Yeah, some good, some not, right?
Yeah, exactly.
A little more variegated a bit as I mix it. Sometimes a little more of the burnt sienna, sometimes a little more
No, this is the estimate
of the
yes, there is
ultramarine blue.
their bed frames and
You could even tease in, because there's some variegation in here. And I'm going to suggest that by letting the mixes of the two colors vary, keeping about the same amount of liquid. Hi, Jeff.
them make it? No, I mean it's for the company.
And then I'm going to put maybe a little more of one color than the other.
It's not even our company. These prices are all.
And that could be the brown or it could be the blue.
It's a computer program. We put it in our.
Oh, maybe even a little alizarin just for some variety. And more water. I'm going to make these objects a slightly darker, dyslexia, a slightly lighter at their bottom.
So this total number is, let's take for instance, famous box. 1, 2, what is it, 10 mean?
Oh, even more blue.
Okay.
Yeah, they're grays, but
That's the price that they allow on that, and then the total for this.
but the component colors that I'm using are going to separate, I hope. Oh, there's one in there too, isn't there? They're going to separate a bit and look like the
Yes.
And then,
variations or textures in these objects, which I'm trying so hard not to name.
flooring, that sort of stuff. So I guess the next thing is, windows. What do you about the windows since they took all the blinds?
Okay, now I could even throw a little bit of that green
The curtains and the blinds. Usually the blinds.
and some more water into that gray and maybe hit parts of this
Curtain wise.
where I think I see some green on them. And if it blossoms, this is a great place to get blossoms in there.
So do I have to go pick those out too?
So if you have a tendency to do that, you're in good luck this time.
Yeah. Blinds are, they break so easily. I mean, they're just,
I did a wood blind in my house, which is a little more, but
yeah.
see what we can do on that. If they allow for plastic, here's what they allow for plastic. Here's what the upcharge would be. And they'd never
Right.
do it.
Okay, let's try that.
Mm-hmm.
But they were plastic. I guess it was plastic.
if you allow this to dry on its own rather than using a hair dryer, you'll get even better places where the color separates and does that thing that only watercolor does. Now, here we go. Here comes the part that really is what I want to try and get across today. And that is the seeing like the light. And I want to paint the shadows on these objects. And I want to do them in a sequence rather than painting each one of these objects with its shadow individually. Because we want to relate to this thing as light coming onto it. I'm going to say, because of what I did with the blue here, I'm going to say the light is coming in from the right at a very relatively shallow angle. So try to think of this as these were letters. You see how this one almost looks like an H? Rather than printing your letters, so to speak, think of it as writing in cursive. In other words, I want to paint these dark shapes as I go across in a sequence, as if I were writing in cursive where the letters have little connectors. So even if you do not get it accurate, it will give the feel or the effect of light coming onto something and casting shadows rather than individual objects just sitting there that have been treated separately on their own. So whenever I'm talking with painters and I hear them use the term shading, I immediately know that they're relating to objects by their contour, and they're relating to the light on the object as a separate thing. That's not the case. The object, we don't know it's even there unless there's light. So, enough soapbox, plenty of ultramarine blue. Now this is going to be slow moving paint. And I'm going to be, just as I was changing the color a little bit here, I'm going to be changing the color. Heck, let's get all our blues in there. I'm going to be changing the character of that blue as I go along. Sometimes I'm going to make a little bluer, sometimes I'm going to make it a little more burnt sienna, sometimes I might throw in some alizarin. I'm going to start out with one of my reds, maybe both of my reds, to make a purplish color. Slow moving. See, that doesn't move as easily as the other colors did. That's maybe a little too more blue. Maybe a little more water. There we go. Now maybe just a touch of the burnt sienna to take the edge off of it. So, as I change it, one of the things I'm going to do is, since light is hitting two different types of material, the color of the shadow should not be the same. So when I get into these cast shadows on this shape, I'm going to maybe throw in some yellow to make it a little greener. If you are, I'm right-handed, so I'm feeling comfortable moving right to left. Opposite of what we write, but whichever way is comfortable for you, sort that out first. Okay, so hello, Kim. A new face. Okay, I'm going to check this. If it looks too dark, I'll just throw a little water into it. Underneath here, let's see.
soon as you hit the water, so it was that deep. Yeah, there was no reef.
So here comes my
I was just out there paddling around
sneaking this over here to pick up
the beach and all of a sudden we
that. Sneaking down to catch this. That's why I'm saying it's like cursive.
the water, turned around, sat down on the sand, and I looked at it.
And you can jump back and you can refine the shape a little bit as you go.
Because the animals know.
I'm connecting my darks,
And so that was swimming.
but think of it as cursive.
When I'm thinking about
Okay, now
and it's still
that was one word. Now we're going to do the second word.
I missed it by probably getting eat by seconds.
Well, and that's the first thing I saw was dorsal fin, and I saw that.
Here's that H,
Then you saw it go in,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Well, these weren't dolphins.
No.
I got in my car and I drove back down. I thought, what, they're cool. They're big. And it put signs up. Beach closed due to sharks.
Really?
Beach closed, shark watch.
There's something down there. Yeah, the coolest experience I think I had, when I took
Now, you can have some fun and make a little redder mix in one corner. Maybe not that red. Well, heck, yeah, let's
So,
park that in there
No.
just to get some variation. Now on this one, that's okay, that's my second word.
oh, okay, good, because I talked to the lady.
Right here, that word still needs to be
It took off so fast.
continue over there. I'm going to throw some yellow into the blue to make a green.
He swam right with me.
Oh, and then that's, here's some commas,
Threatened, you know, 'cause
some
there's
punctuation.
a spot and, you know, but grabbing him probably threw him off a little bit. That's why I was-
Back to my, get into my blues.
Was he swimming over you?
No,
or
under.
Oh, under you.
On top of it.
Oh, okay.
Here's another word.
That's what I do my son who's 11. When we go to the water. I'll swim underneath him. And he'll be on top and I'll swim underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fun. And so you should move somewhere.
I know. I'm
Go to
going.
the beach.
And right there. Oh, 9 meters. He'll be, I like voices.
So you go.
Now, I'm going to put a little water in that
These are small towns. It's all
to get it lighter, maybe a little turquoise.
small towns.
Yeah, I grew up in Quad Cities and I live in Burlington now. Actually, Burlington.
Sure, sure. It's not safe.
No, it isn't. And I mean, I grew up in Nashville, I already
Come down here and get the darker mix. Let's put a little red in it, make it purplier.
11 years old.
More red. Careful with that red, it gets red fast. Connect with that.
Yeah, it is.
Come up and
Work good.
now I'm going to switch to the green again. Maybe I'll just make a separate green over here because it's hard to go back and forth between green and red. So, okay. Do I see? Let's make that bigger. Oh, more blue and red mix, dull purple.
I wasn't happy at the time.
Oh, let's make it bluer.
And kids actually want boundaries. They want boundaries.
Okay, this is dark.
Yeah,
This is another little word.
I hear that, you know, someone doesn't say what they're scared of their kids. And I think, what?
yeah. It's like, it's funny, my daughter, she's 22 now, and I said, well, I'll be your friend when you're 25, that's what I was. So it was still good. I'm waiting till I'm 25, and I said, well,
You won't.
well, she's got a boyfriend now, but then I told my wife, I said, well,
Let's see.
if she, gets engaged or anything, I said, well, that extended it 5 more years. Why did you stay down?
Let's
You bet you're a good
do a
man.
bluer.
I try. We try.
It's hard these days. I sure wouldn't want to be raising kids these days.
As long as
It's
you-
just really hard.
But as long as you stick with
Going from one word to the other.
I'm coaching.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, so as long as you're with them, involved.
Now, I'll tell you right now, my shapes
Yeah.
and my
Because you're there.
You're there with them.
is not deadly accurate
That's great.
to what we're looking at here. But I think I am getting
I've,
I got soccer practice at 5, so you're bored.
the feel of this,
we're up Burlington.
whatever the heck it is, that I'm not
Well, I tell you what.
trying to name yet.
Because they're not going to move in the cold and the snow and all that. I don't care if I have to sleep on the floors, as long as they get the house finished and the flooring and the carpet. I don't mind,
Now, back behind here, I've got some
beyond. I mean, furniture is like.
bluish, greenish,
You will once it starts coming together and you start getting
a
finished.
little bit of it up here
It'll be new.
in the background,
I
and the green
no, it was nice. but
being
I
casting a shadow. This shape is casting a shadow off of here. Now, I'm going to lengthen these shadows a bit.
My husband had started this, with this USAA. It's been like 62 years.
Because
Because his mother started.
that being lighter and this being darker, I think it'll look more like,
And he went to OC,
why it would be that way. Okay, let's let's see. I'm squinting at it. I think I'm going to go with,
I don't know, I went there for the whole 62 years.
No, I know.
Yeah, it does fly by
a little bit more there. Okay, while this is drying,
Already?
I am going to take this brush, squeeze it out,
Well, I appreciate you stopping.
get it
by
kind of
and bringing me this info. But what-
bad hair day,
Not at all. I appreciate it.
smush it into this green,
Anything you know where I'm at,
and I'm going to
Okay.
give me a
do
shout.
some dry brush work
Appreciate it.
Okay.
here.
See ya.
You
Thanks
too.
so much.
Take care.
You too.
What do you prefer, Susan or Wendy?
Wendy,
Okay.
it doesn't matter.
Huh?
It doesn't really matter.
Doesn't matter.
My friends call me Wendy.
Okay. Okay.
So you can see it makes a kind of a footprint when I squish this in here, and that's the bad hair day. And I am going to, down towards the front, I'm going to dry brush in some zippier greens to get a sense of,
Best places.
let's get some of the blue too.
And then which one?
There we go. Now, we're just about there. Let's allow ourselves to talk about it as what it is. Stonehenge. So we got stones, and we'll peel the tape to see if we can make some improvements in small areas. But hopefully that idea of coming across with the shadows as if you were writing in cursive helps. Because if I were to sit there and carefully paint each of these shadows on each of these rocks separately, they would look separate. I can go back now with some purpley darks or whatever. And I can finesse some of these shapes, particularly the crevicey areas where one stone sits upon the other. And you can see I did get them a little bit skinnier or a little bit fatter here and there where they shouldn't be. But I think it helps to convey the idea of light, that it let the shadows connect. So, one more on here. We could take a small brush, also another bad hair day brush, and get in the, dry that off. Dry brush means the brush is dry, the paint is whatever consistency the paint is. So, getting some of this purplish stuff, and I'm going to try and put a little more texture. Really dry that off. There we go. Put a little brown. Ooh, and maybe not that much brown. And hit the brush. Try to get as much paint off it as I can. I get a lot of it off. I actually just wiped it on a towel. So I'm just picking up the texture of the paper here. You'll want to do this on a cold press or a rough paper to take advantage of it. And let's get something maybe a little bluer. Smudge it with your finger. Okay. So, that's the general idea. I want to get that big grouping when I draw it. So even though I'm not dead on accurate here, I think no one will mistake it for something that it's not. Let's get that. You know, and I can play with that, but I don't want to get too crazy with it. And by the way, this is a subject which would be very much easier to do if you were working big. Hi, Shelley. So, another thing we could do on an image like this is, you notice there's a bit of a cloud here. You could expand on that and make that bigger and sort of put an organic shape around your more semi-geometric shapes here. That's always an option. Yeah, let's bring that down, clean that up. Okay, so that's the main thing I wanted to get across here, was seeing that shadow as one continuous kind of element or entity that covers everything that's in shade and then leave behind what's in light. And I use the idea of cursive to hopefully get across the idea of the letters or the shapes connecting, as opposed to doing everything separately. I think this area looks a little flat, so I think I'll just put a break in it. And I'll make that a little darker, as if there's something, because I didn't get my gradation there just so. I'm going to suggest that it's a little earlier, later in the day. I don't know which, not having been there, I don't know which direction I'm looking, other than the light is coming in from here. So this is either west or that's west. So this would be a bit longer. That might be a bit longer. And there we go. So thank you guys for tuning in. I'm going to work with the student here, and I should mention, if you're in Fairfield area this weekend, it's our art walk, and you'll want to see Jenny Salmon's show. It's just fun, whimsical stuff. She's at Cindy's Art Beat. There's a good show at Icon, and I've got shows coming up the following week. Thursday I'll be at the Main Street Art Gallery. Oh, Patty, hello Patty. Thank you, Jean. And then Friday night, the opening in Cedar Rapids at the Gilded Pear. Both of them are 5 to 7-ish. Thank you, Kathy. So everybody stay safe, stay sane, and we'll keep up with this theme with a different, maybe a little more specific project next week. So bye-bye.